Hi and welcome to vlog number 2, Skills and Capacities in Speed and Agility. So a skills issue is when an athlete has problems in a specific movement due to issues with motor control, unfamiliarity with the technical model, and or does not learn the movement pattern properly due to a previous capacity issue. On the other hand, a capacity issue is present when an athlete does not possess the sufficient strength and or mobility to perform a movement according to the technical model. Athlete A is an ex-gymnast and stopped training gymnastics 4 years ago. She currently only does some basic strength training at the gym and has little to no experience with sprint and agility training. We can see this athlete accelerate from a 2-point stance. The first clear thing we can observe is how she does not make use of the full triple extension as is marked by the red area, and that her acceleration angle is very high. In these steps we can now also observe the short stride length and how the knee is barely raised up. The athlete seems to also not be pushing the ground behind her in order to propel herself forward. I have placed a blue circle to mark the poor dorsiflexion happening at the foot. We can now observe the athlete running from the frontal plane. I have placed the yellow circle over the right knee as a reference point. As the video plays along, we can observe how the left knee tends to cross over the midline of the body, but the right knee does not do so to the same extent. The red line in this instance is marking the issue marked in a yellow circle from the sagittal plane, where we could observe that the knees barely go over their starting position as the athlete accelerates. After observing the athlete, I decided to carry out some hip and ankle mobility tests. We started off with the Faber test, which shows that the athlete has poor hip external rotation qualities, but there are no inequalities between both sides as indicated by the red and blue line. Next, we moved on to the laying hip flexion test, which the athlete could do with ease whilst keeping a dorsiflexed foot on both legs. Then performed the knee to wall test, which resulted in showing that she has much more mobility in the left ankle than the right ankle. After the tests, the athlete performed the wall drill and I cued her to drive her feet back into the ground and try to maintain a forward lean. After a few repetitions, I had the athlete perform the acceleration from a 2-point stance again, and an improvement can clearly be seen in the way she accelerates. In summary, this athlete has a skill issue with the acceleration phase, as no major discrepancies in mobility were found, and when the athlete was cued to dorsiflex the foot, push against the ground, and maintain a forward lean, there was an instant improvement in the form of her acceleration. Moving forward, the aim is to get this athlete on a program focusing on the acceleration phase of the sprint, using movements such as the wall drill and some sled pulling drills. Next, we can now observe the athlete perform the 180-degree change of direction drill in slow motion. On the left hand side of the screen, we can see her use her left leg to turn, and on the right hand side of the screen, she will be using her right leg. What we can instantly note is that the athlete lowers her center of mass, but seems to not be able to change her direction of force quickly. Now see the angles at each of her lower limb joints at the point where her center of mass is at its lowest. After measuring her hip, knee and ankle angles, we can understand that she uses a more knee-dominant strategy in her right leg and also holds a more upright position when she is turning using her right leg. I then had the athlete perform unilateral drop jumps from a 30 cm height. We can observe a severe case of knee valgus both when the tests are performed frontally and laterally, which indicates that she lacks the ability to absorb the force eccentrically. From the tests performed, I have concluded that this athlete has a clear eccentric strain deficiency in both legs. She also takes longer to change direction in her right leg, which might be attributed to a previous angle sprain in the same foot. Due to the inability to effectively absorb eccentric forces, she makes poor use of the stretch shortening cycle and fails to use it effectively to change direction. Given that her sports background is gymnastics, it was not expected that she performs very well in the change of direction drill, as the sport itself is mainly linear. Going forward, this athlete will continue following a general strength training program with an emphasis on eccentric loading and absorbing force eccentrically. The main movements which will be used are bilateral and unilateral drop jumps and medicine ball slams, together with some change of direction drills. Ankle mobility training will also be given its importance. Athlete 2 for this vlog is part of the athletic population, as she is a local female handball player. Even though her sport involves a lot of change of direction, her playing position involves more of a pivoting movement, and she does not have that much experience with speed and change of direction mechanics training. We can see this athlete accelerate from the sagittal plane. We can instantly see that she has a decent forward lean and makes good use of the triple extension. From the frontal plane, we can clearly observe that her feet externally rotate right before impact with the ground. This can be termed as duck feet. Also, as the knees are raised, both of them cross over the midline of the body, but this is mostly visible in the left knee. Her first step, her trunk angle, is at 37 degrees, which is an ideal trunk angle. As was very visible in the previous video, it is difficult for her to maintain her forward lean, as in her second step, her trunk angle is at 41 degrees, and this continues to rise aggressively as her steps increase. This is most likely attributed to the nature of her sport, where she must run in quite an upright posture, such that she can always be available for the ball and have vision of the whole playing field. Over here we can now see the contact point of the foot on the floor. It seems to be right under the center of mass, but in the acceleration phase, it is ideally behind the center of mass, such that the athlete is pushing the ground behind her. Here we can observe side by side the external foot rotation happening upon impact with the ground. This is not only problematic as it is energy inefficient, but can create long-term problems as forces are absorbed incorrectly by the joints. I then proceeded to perform the same tests with this athlete as I did with athlete 1. For the Faber test, the athlete proved to have a good hip external rotation mobility. In the hip flexion test, we can observe that as the hip angle goes to 90 degrees, the athlete has difficulty in keeping the opposite hip fully extended, as the quadriceps and the hip flexors can be seen to flex in an effort to bring the knee closer to the hip. In the left leg, there was also a visible hip internal rotation, past 90 degrees of hip flexion. In the knee-to-wall test, the athlete did not manage to touch the wall with her knees, but no discrepancies were found between both feet. In summary, this athlete has a capacity issue with the acceleration phase, as the athlete lacks sufficient hip mobility, thus the hip externally rotates and causes the feet to rotate internally before impact with the ground. This may also be due to having weak adductors. Moving forward, this athlete will be focusing on improving hip and ankle mobility, together with performing adductor strengthening exercises such as the Copenhagen plank, and the exercises being shown in these clips. I had to perform and film myself performing these movements due to the new COVID-19 measures that were locally imposed since the clips of the athletes were first filmed. The aim of these exercises is to keep the foot aligned and straight when striking the ground, with the resistance being implemented from either side. It is important to keep the foot dorsiflexed at all times. We are now going to observe this athlete in the change of direction. What we can see here are side-by-side video clips of athlete 2 performing the 180-degree change of direction with both limbs in slow motion. A variety of strengths and weaknesses can be observed in these clips, and these will be broken down and analyzed in the coming clips, starting with the right leg. It is visible that with her right leg, this athlete does not seem to have any issues in absorbing the force and keeps a relatively straight knee. Here, the red and blue circles are showing how she prepares her feet by turning them to face her intended direction of travel, even though they are pointing a bit diagonally and not back to 180 degrees. She then pushes off the ground and makes good use of the triple extension to accelerate back to a high speed as quickly as possible. Her left leg, we can see that she seems to have a smaller knee angle, as she seems to find it more difficult to absorb the force. Here the circles are showing us that instead of pointing her feet towards the direction she wants to go, they are pointing to the side. The yellow arrow is marking her resultant movement, which was observed in the slow-mo clip. We can see how the movement strategy that she uses is suboptimal and results in her using a curved run to change direction. To test if this athlete has the eccentric strength capacity to absorb force, I had her perform the unilateral drop jump tests. In all of the 4 drops, she proved to have the sufficient eccentric strength to absorb her body weight's force without having her knees cave in and staying stable when landing. This athlete has a skill issue with the change of direction, as there is no visible eccentric strength deficiency. Her sport involves a lot of changes of direction, however, given the nature of her playing position, she might subconsciously be performing more changes of direction on her right leg than her left leg. Moving forward, this athlete will work on improving her change of direction by progressing from the 45 degree to 180 degree angles using the right movement strategy according to the technical model. In the acceleration, athlete A had a skill issue, as when cued, she instantly improved her form. In the change of direction, she needs to work on her capacity to absorb force eccentrically in order to be able to make use of her stretch shortening cycle effectively. In the acceleration, athlete B lacks the sufficient hip mobility and strength to keep her limbs aligned. In the change of direction, she seems to prefer using her right leg, and this makes it a skill issue as she has the sufficient strength to absorb the forces eccentrically.